Black waitress dumps water on a Japanese pregnant woman, unaware she's the Yakuza boss wife. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night when everything changed. Akari, a pregnant Japanese woman in an expensive designer dress, sat alone at a corner table in the city's most exclusive restaurant, Viva. She was nervously checking her phone, having been waiting for over 20 minutes. The discomfort was palpable as other diners cast curious glances her way, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. Her hand moved instinctively to her 7-month belly, a protective gesture. She felt her baby kick, a tiny, reassuring flutter as if sensing its mother's distress. That's when Keisha, a black waitress simmering with a deep-seated bitterness, made her move. Without a word of warning, Keisha approached the table and deliberately dumped an entire pitcher of ice water across Akari's $3,000 dress. The freezing water soaked through the delicate fabric to her skin in an instant. As Akari gasped in shock, Keisha leaned in close, her voice dripping with pure venom. "Oops, my bad. Maybe you should stick to places where you actually belong instead of pretending to be something you're not." The entire restaurant fell into a tomb-like silence. Every conversation halted. Every fork froze mid-air. Akari sat there, 7 months pregnant, water dripping from her ruined designer outfit onto the polished marble floor. Her hands trembled as she felt the cold water seeping through, a sudden, sharp chill that made her worry for her baby. The humiliation, however, burned hotter than the cold water ever could. But instead of breaking down into tears, Akari's eyes flashed with a controlled, icy fury. She stood up slowly, water still cascading from her dress, and looked Keisha dead in the eye. Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took to contain her rage and shield her unborn child from the stress. "You have no idea what you just did," Akari said, her voice barely a whisper, yet it carried a weight that made everyone in the room lean forward to hear. Then, something incredible happened. Akari reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulled out exact change for her untouched meal, and placed it neatly on the table. Alongside it, she laid a crisp $500 bill as a tip. As she walked toward the exit with her head held high, those who looked closely could see the tears she was fighting back, the way her breath hitched in her throat as she desperately maintained her dignity. Keisha stood frozen in shock for a moment, but deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that something was terribly wrong. She quickly masked her growing unease with a smirk, turning to her co-workers. "Finally got rid of her," she whispered, pretending she had won some great victory. But her hands were shaking slightly as she cleaned up the water, and she couldn't quite meet her colleagues' eyes. Keisha had no idea what was waiting just outside the restaurant's doors. As Akari approached the gleaming black SUV parked at the curb, a dangerously composed man stepped out. This was Kenji. When he saw his wife's condition, the dark water stains on her dress, the barely contained tears in her eyes, the way she was trembling, his serene expression shifted into a mask of cold fury that would have terrified anyone who witnessed it. "What happened?" Kenji asked, his voice deadly calm as he gently helped his pregnant wife into the passenger seat. His hands were tender, a stark contrast to the storm of rage building inside him. Akari looked back at the restaurant, then at her husband, her voice breaking as she said 4 words that would seal Keisha's fate. "Someone needs to learn respect." Keisha thought she'd humiliated a powerless woman, but she had just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. Keisha Morrison was 26 years old, a single mother working double shifts at Viva just to survive. She was bitter, exhausted, and barely scraping by in a cramped studio apartment where the walls seemed to close in on her every night. 3 weeks earlier, she'd been passed over for a promotion that would have changed her life, and that rejection had been eating away at her soul like acid. Every night she lay awake, wondering why her life was such a struggle while everyone else seemed to have it so easy. This wasn't Keisha's first act of prejudice. For months, she'd been targeting well-dressed Asian customers, making snide comments disguised as jokes, assuming they were all flaunting money they didn't truly possess. Each time, she felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, as if bringing someone else down could somehow lift her up from her own misery. Management turned a blind eye because Keisha was a master at playing the victim when complaints were filed, producing streams of tears as she claimed she was being unfairly targeted. What Keisha didn't know was that the woman she just humiliated was Akari Tanaka, a 32-year-old, MIT-educated architect whose visionary designs shaped city skylines. Despite a net worth of $50 million, she remained humble and kind, never forgetting her own modest beginnings. Her husband, Kenji Tanaka, was a legitimate businessman who owned construction companies, security firms, and real estate across 3 states. His empire spanned dozens of businesses, all legally operated. But there were whispers about his deeper connections, the whispers of the Yakuza. There were phone calls that ended abruptly when Akari entered the room, and meetings with men who spoke in code and whose eyes held dark secrets. Kenji had fought his way up from nothing, building his fortune for her, his queen. Viva catered to millionaires and celebrities, a place where a single meal cost more than Keisha made in a week. The restaurant couldn't afford to lose customers, but Keisha's bitterness had consumed her ability to think rationally. Within hours, she was celebrating like she'd won the lottery, bragging to co-workers about how she'd put that woman in her place. She even posted on social media, had to teach some fake rich people a lesson tonight about trying to eat where they don't belong. Some people need to learn their place. The likes and supportive comments fed her ego, making her feel vindicated in her cruelty. But while Keisha celebrated, Kenji was making quiet inquiries. His jaw was clenched with a barely controlled rage that threatened to consume him. His associates were ready for immediate, violent retribution, but Kenji restrained them with an iron will. "My wife handles her own battles," he stated, his voice like chipped ice, "but a disrespect to my family will be handled by me." He began learning everything about Keisha Morrison. His investigation was fueled by a cold fury that terrified even his closest allies. The stress from the incident sent Akari to the hospital that same night. Early contractions racked her body as she sobbed in Kenji's arms, not from physical pain, but from the emotional trauma of being degraded. When Kenji got that call from the doctor, his controlled fury transformed into something far more dangerous. Someone hadn't just disrespected his wife, they'd threatened the life of his unborn child. And that was a sin for which there was no forgiveness. Through his vast network, Kenji discovered that he indirectly owned the building Viva operated in through a series of shell companies. His construction company had built the restaurant 5 years ago. His security firm protected half the businesses in the district. Kenji's web of influence was vast and hidden, and now every thread would be used to teach Keisha about consequences. Keisha's vulnerability ran deeper than anyone knew. Her ex-husband owed money to loan sharks, dangerous men who didn't accept late payments. Her sick mother needed expensive medication that insurance wouldn't cover. Her 8-year-old son, Marcus, needed a critical surgery she couldn't afford. She was drowning, lashing out at the world because she felt powerless against the forces crushing her. The connections ran even deeper. Keisha's ex-husband had borrowed money from one of Kenji's underworld associates. Her mother's life-saving medication came from a pharmacy in a building Kenji owned. Her son, Marcus, went to a public school where Akari volunteered her time and money, helping to fund art programs for underprivileged children. Kenji was building a complete picture of Keisha's life, discovering a woman so desperate that destroying her would be almost too easy. But he wasn't interested in an easy victory. He was interested in justice. And justice required precision. 3 weeks after the incident, Keisha's world started crumbling. Her shifts at Viva were cut from 40 hours to 25. The restaurant was hemorrhaging customers after a video of the incident went viral. Her apartment rent mysteriously increased by $400 a month. The new management company, a shell corporation Kenji had acquired, cited market adjustments with cold indifference. Her car insurance premium suddenly spiked by 60%, the company claiming they had discovered previous incidents that existed only in paperwork expertly fabricated by Kenji's people. Within a month, Keisha was drowning. She picked up extra shifts cleaning offices at night, but no matter how hard she worked, the money was never enough. Her mother's medication costs kept rising. Her son's medical bills piled up. The debt collectors were calling more frequently, their voices growing more threatening. Keisha blamed everyone but herself, never once considering that her actions had consequences. Meanwhile, Kenji orchestrated every move with the precision of a surgeon. He didn't need violence. He had influence. But then Akari discovered what her husband was doing. And instead of being horrified, she felt a dark satisfaction that surprised her. I want to make sure she understands exactly what happens when someone disrespects our family, she said, her voice laced with ice. Kenji looked up from his papers, surprised. I thought you'd want me to stop. The humiliation still burned fresh in her memory, the shock of cold water, the racist words, the stress that had put her in the hospital and threatened their unborn child. She's a single mother with a sick child, Akari said, her voice devoid of the compassion that usually defined her. Good. Maybe now she'll understand what it feels like to be powerless, to watch someone you love suffer while others decide your fate. Akari, Kenji's voice carried a note of concern. Are you sure about this? Once we go down this path, there's no coming back. Akari's voice cracked with bitter emotion. She poured water on me while I was pregnant. She tried to destroy my dignity based on my race. She made me feel like nothing, Kenji. There's no such thing as too far when someone tries to strip away your humanity. Kenji watched his wife, realizing her racism had done more than just hurt Akari, it had fundamentally changed her. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Akari's smile was as sharp as a blade. I want her to lose everything. And Kenji, she looked at him with eyes that held no mercy, I want her to know it was me. I want her to know that the woman she thought was beneath her was the one who brought her entire world crashing down for the first time. Kenji felt a chill run down his spine. He'd unleashed something in his wife that might be impossible to control. The stress continued to take its toll on Akari's pregnancy. The complications returned with a vengeance. More contractions, more terrifying trips to the hospital. When Kenji received another emergency call, something fundamental shifted inside him. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Kisha's actions were now actively threatening his child's life. Every contraction Akari experienced, every tear she shed, could be traced directly back to that single moment of prejudice. 3 weeks after that fateful night, Kisha's life became a living nightmare. It started with a phone call that shattered her world. Her 8-year-old son, Marcus, had collapsed at school, clutching his chest and gasping for air. At the hospital, doctors delivered news that felt like a death sentence. Marcus needed immediate open-heart surgery to repair a congenital defect that had suddenly become life-threatening. Without it, he could die within 48 hours. The surgery cost $68,000. Her insurance covered barely half. She needed $34,000 she absolutely didn't have. The hospital wouldn't operate without payment guarantees. As she processed this terror, her phone rang again. Viva's owner fired her, citing the viral video and the over $200,000 in lost business it had caused. Then her mother's pharmacy called, the medication keeping her alive had been discontinued by her insurance. The new out-of-pocket cost was $4,000 a month. Finally, her landlord served eviction papers. She had 7 days. She found herself in the sterile pediatric wing of St. Mary's Hospital, holding Marcus's small, cold hand. Dr. Finch, a distinguished pediatric surgeon, looked at the chart with grave concern. Your son's condition is critical, he said. We need to operate within 24 hours. I don't have that kind of money, Kisha sobbed. Please, there has to be something. Dr. Finch sighed. There might be one option. There's a businessman, Kenji Tanaka. His foundation sometimes helps with cases like this. It's your best shot. Kisha didn't recognize the name, but she clung to this last shred of hope. 2 hours later, she was in the gleaming lobby of Tanaka Global Holdings, clutching Marcus's medical records. Surprisingly, she was told Mr. Tanaka would see her immediately. When Kisha was escorted into the executive office, a man stood with his back to her, looking out at the city skyline. When he turned around, Kisha's blood ran cold. It was Kenji, the man she'd seen outside the restaurant. So, Kenji said, his voice deadly calm, "You're Kisha Morrison. The woman who dumped water on my pregnant wife and told her she didn't belong." Kisha's world collapsed. She's your wife? So you're the one who... Yes, Kenji finished, settling behind his massive desk. I've been systematically dismantling your life since you decided to attack my wife because of her race. Yes, that would be me. Keisha broke down completely, sobbing so violently her whole body shook. My son. He's dying. He needs surgery. I know what I did was unforgivable, but please don't punish him for my mistakes. Your son needs $68,000 to live, Kenji stated, his expression unreadable. And you came to me for help. Do you see the irony in that, Mrs. Morrison? Please, Keisha whispered. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll work for you for free for the rest of my life. Just please, don't let my innocent child die. Just then, the office door opened, and Akari entered. Seeing Keisha sobbing on the floor, a broken mess of a woman, was jarring. Keisha turned to her, her face a mask of grief and terror. I'm so sorry. I was desperate, angry, drowning. I thought you were pretending. I thought her words came out in broken gasps. So you decided racism was the answer to your problems. Akari's voice was steady, but the deep hurt was still there. You decided to humiliate a pregnant woman because you were having a bad day. Please, Keisha begged, her voice a broken whisper. Don't hurt my son. He's innocent. In that moment, watching Keisha, Akari felt her hardened heart begin to soften. The rage was still there, but so was the compassionate woman she had always been. She turned to her husband and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Kenji made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. I'm going to save your son's life, he told Keisha, his voice firm. But then, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation. He had the full amount wired to the hospital. Marcus's surgery took 8 grueling hours. When it was over and he was stable, breathing steadily in recovery, Keisha collapsed in the hospital hallway, sobbing with a mixture of relief, guilt, and a profound, shattering understanding of the mercy she had been shown by the very people she had tried to hurt. 3 days later, Akari visited Keisha in Marcus's recovery room. Keisha looked haunted, consumed by a self-hatred so profound it was making her physically ill. I keep thinking about your baby, Keisha whispered, unable to meet Akari's eyes. I could have hurt your child. I could have caused you to lose your baby because I was angry and bitter. What kind of monster does that make me? Akari's own eyes filled with tears. You have a choice to make, Keisha, she said, her voice gentle but firm. You can choose redemption. But this isn't just about an apology. This is about fundamentally transforming who you are. It's about facing the ugliness inside your soul and choosing to become someone worthy of your son's love. Keisha's public apology became a viral moment of raw vulnerability. Standing outside Viva, she spoke from a heart that had been broken open. 3 weeks ago, I poured ice water on a pregnant Japanese woman because I assumed she didn't belong, she said, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to hurt her because I was drowning in my own failures. The truth is, Dr. Akari Tanaka is an architectural genius who volunteers her time and money to help children. She is everything I pretended she wasn't. But even if she had been poor and struggling just like me, what I did would still be completely unforgivable. She looked directly into the camera. The woman I tried to destroy with my racism saved my son's life. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I don't deserve it. I'm asking for the chance to spend the rest of my life proving that people can change, that love can grow in soil poisoned by hate. Keisha threw herself into diversity training with the desperation of someone trying to save her own soul. She heard story after story from people who had experienced exactly what she had put Akari through. At a community center for new immigrants, she met Yumi, a young, scared Japanese mother who reminded her painfully of Akari. Slowly, over weeks of genuine kindness, Yumi began to trust her. The day Yumi gave birth, she asked Keisha to be in the delivery room. Holding that perfect, tiny baby, Keisha finally understood the full magnitude of what she had almost destroyed. 6 months later, Akari and Kenji walked into Bella Vista, the new restaurant where Keisha was working. With them was their newborn daughter, Hannah, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. Keisha's heart pounded. Dr. and Mr. Tanaka, she said, her voice steady but her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Welcome. It's an honor to serve you." Akari looked at Keisha and saw someone completely transformed. The bitter, angry woman was gone, replaced by someone radiating warmth and hard-earned wisdom. "Keisha," Akari said softly. "How are you doing?" "I'm becoming someone my son can be proud of," Keisha replied, her voice full of overwhelming gratitude. "Every day, I'm working to become someone who deserves the incredible grace you showed me." Later, training new staff, Keisha shared her story. A young waitress asked hesitantly, "But what if you really don't think someone belongs here?" Keisha's response came from the deepest part of her transformed heart. "Then you remember that love is always the answer. The moment you think someone doesn't belong because of how they look, you've already lost your own humanity. Kenji and Akari Tanaka could have destroyed me, and they would have been justified. Instead, they taught me that redemption is possible for anyone willing to do the hard, painful work of becoming worthy of it. The woman I was died in that hospital room. The woman I am now was born from their mercy. And every day, I choose to honor that gift by making sure no one else has to learn these lessons the way I did." The cycle of prejudice wasn't just broken, it was transformed into a cycle of love, understanding, and connection. Keisha Morrison learned that the most powerful force in the universe isn't hatred or revenge, but the courage to choose love and the strength to keep choosing it, every single day, for the rest of your life.